So, there's a massive conflict erupting in West Asia, and it's sending some serious shockwaves through the global economy. But right in the middle of all this chaos, something really different, something pretty unexpected, is happening in India. We're going to dig into how India is navigating the storm and why its economic story is looking so different from, well, pretty much everyone else's.
And just to get a sense of the scale here, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is calling this the biggest energy crisis of the modern era. I mean, they are not pulling any punches. That's a huge statement.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, it all comes down to geography. You're looking at the Strait of Hormuz. It's this incredibly narrow strip of water, but it's basically the jugular vein for global energy. A full 1/5 of the entire world's oil and gas has to pass through it. Now, with the conflict that kicked off on February 28, 2026, a US-led naval blockade has essentially shut the whole thing down.
And the result of that? Bam! Ship traffic through that vital choke point has just collapsed by more than 95%. When you squeeze a global artery like that, everybody feels it, and they feel it fast.
Yeah, the fallout is pretty much what you'd expect. Energy prices are going through the roof, supply chains are a mess, and the world's economy is slamming on the brakes. The IMF had to take its forecast for global growth in 2026 and just slash it, all the way down to a sluggish 3.1%.
So that brings us to the big question, right? What on earth does this mean for India? You'd think, as a country that imports a ton of energy, a crisis like this would be devastating. But this is where the story gets really interesting.
And check this out. While the IMF is downgrading the rest of the world, it actually upgraded India's growth forecast for 2026, and not by a little, up to a really strong 6.5%. It's the complete opposite of what's happening everywhere else. So how is that even possible?
While the key to solving this economic paradox isn't in the conflict zone, it's actually in a completely different arena, global trade. It all comes down to this landmark deal between India and the United States, nicknamed the Trump-Modi Reset. And this was about more than just trade. It was a major strategic realignment. This deal, which was announced back in early 2026, was a total game changer. It put an end to all this trade friction that had been building up, and instead it created this powerful economic shield for India by giving it special access to the enormous $30 trillion US market. So here's how it totally flipped the script. Before the deal, India was staring down the barrel of these massive 50% tariffs on its goods going to the US. After the deal, poof, those are gone. All of a sudden, Indian products have this huge competitive edge.
And this is the number that changes the whole story. The tariffs dropped from that peak of 50% all the way down to an average of just 10%. The IMF basically pointed to this one thing and said, that's it. That's the reason. They believe the upside from this trade deal is actually big enough to outweigh all the negative stuff from the energy crisis.
Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. How does this actually feel on the ground? Because this weird mix, a trade boom happening during a global energy crisis, is creating some very clear winners and losers across different Indian industries.
A report from ICICI Direct breaks this down perfectly. On the winning side, you've got sectors like energy security and defense. The crisis is actually pushing them to innovate faster, boosting things like electric vehicles and nuclear power. But it's a totally different story for industries that rely on crude oil, like paints or consumer goods. Their costs are soaring and it's squeezing them hard. And then you have sectors like medical tourism, which have taken a direct hit because the flow of patients from West Asia has pretty much dried up.
So you have these two giant forces pushing and pulling on the economy, this incredible new trade advantage, and this really dangerous global crisis. What does that mean for the road ahead? Well, it's a tightrope walk between this newfound resilience and some very, very real risks.
Experts are starting to use this term to describe India's position, sovereign resilience. It sounds a little fancy, but the idea is simple. It's about a country building its own economic shield through strong domestic demand and smart trade policy, a shield that can hopefully withstand huge global shocks just like the one we're seeing right now.
But, and there's always a but, that shield is not made of vibranium. It's not invincible. The IMF is very clear that there are huge risks. They've even mapped out a severe scenario where a long war keeps oil prices above $110 a barrel. If that happens, global growth could fall to just 2%, and there's just no way a global recession like that wouldn't hit India too.
And that leaves us with the big, multi-trillion-dollar question for the future. This trade deal has given India an amazing economic buffer, for sure. But how strong is it really? Its ability to hold up if this global storm gets worse and lasts longer? Well, that's the real test that's still to come.
Hey, if this explainer helped you make sense of this really complex situation, do us a favor and hit like, share it with someone, and subscribe so we can keep breaking down these big topics for you.
So what do you think about India's economic path? Is this resilience for real? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you and answer any questions you might have.